should probably start. So, hello everyone, and welcome to another podcast episode of the Clinician Engineers Hub. I'm Yosra Magdi, and I'm your host for today. I'm a fourth-year medical student at Qatar University. With us today is Mayo Wehde, and he's, I hope I pronounced that correctly.
It's Wehde.
Wehde, yes.
Wehde.
I pronounced it the Arabic way. Right. Okay. So with us today is Wehde, and he's chair of the Mayo Clinic Division of Engineering, assistant professor of biomedical engineering in the Mayo Clinic College of Medicine and Science, and fellow in the Mayo Clinic Academy of Educational Excellence. So he's an executive leader of a team of engineers, software developers, and project managers with a focus on product discovery and delivery of solutions to problems faced by healthcare providers. So Mark, it's wonderful having you here with us today. I suppose I'll just give you like some leeway to introduce yourself better, and then we'll get started with the talk.
All right. Well, thank you, Yosra. I appreciate the invitation to speak with you today. I've been on the advisory board of the Clinician Engineer Hub probably for 2 or 3 years now. And of course, always my whole career been very interested in this partnership between the engineers and the physicians. And hopefully we'll get a little bit of a chance to talk about some of that today.
All right. So, you said we say engineers, physicians, and a lot of people right now, when you say engineering and medicine, just start thinking, okay, what put the two together? So especially within medicine, since it's a very new and very recent merging of fields. So why would you say that you'd need engineering in healthcare? Or what would you say to introduce those new to the concept, the fusion between the two?
Yeah, I don't think that there's really anything new about engineers being involved in healthcare. We know that healthcare has always been very patient-centric, but really over the last 150 years, technology has driven most of the improvement in healthcare, whether it's antibiotics or new surgical tools, monitoring equipment, therapy devices that were made possible by invention of things like the transistor almost 80 years ago. Technology has always been key to providing better and better care. And we look at that here at Mayo. Back in 2018, under the leadership of our new CEO, Dr. Gianrico Ferrugia, we developed a new strategic plan called Bold Forward 2030. And in it, we recognized the industry is changing dramatically over the next decade. The technologies that we're seeing today, what we're calling the fourth industrial revolution technologies, I think have reached a tipping point. We're going to be seeing huge and disruptive change across all sorts of industries. And I think this change is going to be fundamentally different from what we've seen before, because it's not just about smart and connected machines and systems. The scope is much wider. We're seeing breakthroughs across all sorts of technologies like 3D printing that we were talking about before we got started here, gene sequencing, nanotechnology, renewables, robotics. We've got a physician right now working on micro or nanobots that he wants to control to move throughout the human body, so real science fiction kind of stuff. And I think we're going to have all sorts of interesting way of tracking patient conditions and treatments and outcomes. And these technologies are all fusing around the digital world, the physical world, and the biological domains. And that's what's created something kind of entirely different. And I think that really means healthcare organizations need to think of themselves as technology organizations as well, and really consider that partnership then between the engineer and the physician in order to really be competitive and to be successful over the next 10 to 20 years.
Yeah, and you mentioned that many healthcare organizations around the world right now have a huge focus on engineering and medicine, the fusion between both. Like you said, whether that be 3D printing, machine learning, and so on and so forth. What is Mayo Clinic doing to stay competitive for the next 10 to 20 years?
So disruptive technologies can take down any business. There's a great book called The Innovator's Dilemma by Clayton Christensen, where he introduces this concept of disruptive technologies. And at Mayo Clinic, we recognize that. And we also see the big tech companies getting into healthcare, whether it be the Amazons, Apples, Googles, Microsoft. These companies have the ability to disrupt any market they go into. Amazon just announced a $4 billion purchase of Medically Me, which is a home healthcare provider. Well, we don't want to be disrupted at Mayo Clinic. We want to be the disruptors. So we've got several big initiatives coming out of Mayo Clinic. We're moving aggressively into remote and home care with our Advanced Care at Home initiative. The pandemic has really shown us how effective telemedicine can be, and our goal is to find better ways of treating patients in their own homes and in their own communities. I've had over the last couple of years several virtual visits to my primary care physician, and it's so much more convenient to do that from home instead of driving to the clinic, finding parking, getting to the waiting room, waiting and waiting and waiting, and then finally seeing the physician. So I think remote and telemedicine is going to be huge. We're also seeing, we now have the ability to start to harness the power of AI and data analytics. At Mayo, we've got this tremendous library of patient information that goes back into the 1800s. And now we finally have the tools to use that data to find answers for current problems. We put an AI factory in place to let our physicians come in and explore hypotheses. We're looking at novel ways of putting data together to find better answers, better diagnose conditions, or find better therapies. And we're creating a pathway that allows us to quickly integrate these findings into the clinical workflow. We've got to be able to move quicker, to take these new innovations that we're coming with and translate them to patient care as quickly as possible. And that's one of the big drivers or big changes I've been seeing over the last few years is this focus on translation, on getting ideas out of the research lab into patient care as soon as possible.
And so can you give specific examples in relation to maybe, let's say, specific cases you've seen or conditions that you've seen that you took in as a team and started working on?
Yeah, so there's a couple areas. So within the engineering team, some of our biggest successes are tied to these major initiatives at Mayo. Probably our biggest single project over the last couple of years has been work to develop point-of-care printed titanium implants that'll allow our surgeons to provide better matched implants for their patients. This allows a lot of that preliminary work to be done in advance outside of the operating room, lessening the time in surgery. Other things that we've been doing support innovation at Mayo. So we've really been focused on developing an agile sprint-based approach to innovation, which allows us to really quickly de-risk ideas. And we do this by partnering the engineers, the physicians, our business development and IP experts into rapid sprints that are aimed at rapidly iterating solutions to problems. And I think of this as de-risking innovation because we're trying to bring the key stakeholders to the table to eliminate ideas that just aren't viable, whether it's technically or in the marketplace or just don't meet the needs of the physicians or the patients. And on top of that, we're developing some ways of rapidly prototyping to quickly eliminate ideas that don't work. In addition, Mayo's providing funding for rapid prototyping of innovations that are coming out of this sprint process. So really focused on what we can do to try to get ideas out of the physician's head and into something that's usable.
Right. So, and obviously in doing that, you're working with all sorts of different specialists, each coming from their own background. I imagine it must be quite the challenge, right? Trying to get different people with different minds per se working together. So on that note, what are some of the challenges that you're seeing with this kind of development and, these kind of teams? What have you faced so far, even broadly speaking?
Yeah, I think we know that healthcare is facing a number of significant challenges, even without thinking about the dramatic changes that are being brought on by the digitization of our world. We see costs rising at an unsustainable rate, and this digitization of health and healthcare are creating some fundamental challenges to our conception of privacy and ownership of data. And then the rapid evolution of science and medicine are driving prices up too and making it more expensive to provide care. There's just so much data to aggregate, and we keep saying, gosh, wouldn't it be great if I could just use this in a clinical setting? But in many cases, it's just too much data. And then one of the biggest drivers of change is I think the almost critical issue of our aging demographics. By 2050, the world's going to be home to 10 billion people. 2 billion of those are going to be over 60, and almost 500 million are going to be over 80. By 2100, that number is going to increase to over 3 billion people over 60 years of old. And we got to provide care for those folks. So those I think are some of the challenges that we're facing. And fortunately, we're going to be able to use technology to help us with some of those. And that's why I'm so excited about the ability to do remote monitoring, provide remote care at home, because we're going to have so many people that are going to need care. And most of us, as we're aging, we want to be able to stay in our homes with our families as long as possible. And I think technology is something that can help us do that.
Right. And so, you did mention earlier that Mayo Clinic has a large database going right back to the 1800s. Do you think that you'd find enough data on that database that applies to all age demographics, including, like you said, by 2050, for instance, or years from now, we'll have a huge aging demographic? Would you have data that actively applies to that demographic and can actually help in a sense so that you can see patterns?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple ways of looking at this. One, we are collecting so much data now that we're going to be able to use over the next 20 or 30 years, and we're collecting data now that you couldn't collect 100 years ago. So we don't have all of the data, but what we have through this long historical record is we have records on families going back 5, 6, 7, 8 generations, and we also have a huge data bank. Well, it's not a data bank. It's we have a tissue registry where we have patient samples. So we have tumors and various things like that we since the 1800s that have been stored in formaldehyde and things like that, so that we're able to go back and get DNA samples and really multi-generationally in some cases go back and trace the history of some of these diseases, as technology is giving us the tools to do some of that. So there's certainly a lot of value in this, in this significant history that we have in this one community.
I don't think any other hospital, very few institutions probably have databases like the one you just mentioned, especially with the tissues. I know we don't have that here, so that was quite impressive.
We have a whole
with that.
We have a whole warehouse full of it. Mayo is really unique because people come all over the world to Mayo Clinic for some of the most challenging of diseases, and so you will see conditions that there's maybe 5 or 10 people that have this in a year, right? And the one place where that sees the most of them is Mayo Clinic. So we have tumor samples and things like that just are not that common, and so it's pretty incredible to have a resource like that, I think.
And so with resources like these, what do you expect the future to look like for engineering and health? You have all these databases, all these resources. What are we going to do with it?
Well, I think I see everyone leveraging these clinical data analytics platforms, the virtual care platforms, and embracing remote diagnostics and management. I think these are going to let us explore ways to bring care into the home. It's going to let us hopefully speed the discovery of new diagnostics and therapies, and really make actionable insights from the data coming from wearable devices. If we can't make therapy decisions based on that, they're not doing us a lot of good. So it is the ability to form actionable insights. And across the board, we're already leveraging AI and machine learning. We're taking real world data and we're using it to diagnose and treat patients. For example, in Mayo Clinic, we've developed a new AI algorithm that runs on a remote ECG monitor, so a wearable device that calculates blood potassium levels based on the ECG waveform. So think about being able to measure analytes essentially based on the ECG waveform itself. And that was developed with our cardiovascular group in partnership with our AI engineers, and that's been licensed for broad distribution. This is an FDA approved device. Of course, the goal and expectation is to be able to monitor, diagnose, and treat patients anywhere, anytime. because not only do our patients want care in their home and communities, but also in the United States, our rural communities in the US are losing access to care at a pretty alarming rate. Young physicians just aren't interested in practicing in small, rural, and remote communities. The physicians there are getting older and retiring, and this is creating a severe access issue here in the United States. So we're counting on healthcare changing. And by 2030, 90% of the people in the world are going to have some sort of a digital presence. And this impacts how we can provide healthcare. And for me as an engineer, I like to start thinking about healthcare at the edge. So developing devices that leverage the power of AI and data analytics, but do it in the patient's environment. So this is where I really start talking about edge AI. We can send data up to the cloud, but that has a lot of risks. We ran into this as we were trying to make this connection work earlier. We've got bandwidth congestion, network reliability, latency issues, all that can, have a negative impact on health outcomes. So in many cases, the best option is to analyze and act on the data at the point of collection. So I think edge computing is going to make big inroads into healthcare over the next decade. And in full disclosure, this is close to my heart because my team's not an IT team. We're not a digital platform group. We develop devices, mechanical devices, implants, electromechanical devices based on microcontrollers and embedded code. And so that's one of the areas that I think is just going to be very exciting.
So basically healthcare 4.0.
Healthcare 4.0, yes. Yeah, these devices we're developing, they've got to fit. They've got to fit into existing workflows. It's a challenge right now. Right now, you can give a patient a device or a standalone app to get data, but that doesn't scale very well. So it doesn't integrate into billing systems or the patient ordering system. So we do have to think about scaling these healthcare 4.0 technologies into existing EMRs, because this is where the physicians want to see the data. This is where they prescribe. This is where the billing happens. But more than that, these devices are going to have to be human-centric. We're not going to have trained users. We're not going to have nurses and technicians, at least not in the home. So human factors is going to be incredibly important. And we're actually finding in the advanced care at home initiatives that we're working on that we're no longer caring just for the patient. We're actually providing help and guidance for the caregiver. And our systems have to be designed for that. So think about an elderly couple where one is sent home and their partner is providing care. What does their partner do when they have a question or need help? Right? They need to be able to get those answers. So it's no longer just about the patient. It's about supporting that entire set of caregivers. And then another big problem we're seeing is interoperability. We want to monitor a lot of vital signs, and we can't have each of them having a separate setup or something like that. They just have to work. They have to integrate well with each other. So that's some of the biggest challenges that we're seeing. And then we got to remember security too. I've mentioned the tech companies getting into healthcare. I think they have a lot to bring, but healthcare is not the same as the tech world. We can't be shipping features with products with bugs. We can't have our patients be our beta testers. So, the mentality and approach is going to have to change.
Yeah, and you definitely can't. What I've seen here, at least, is sometimes you have companies trying to get into the world of healthcare. They still haven't, in a sense, they still don't have data that their solution actually works. It's not exactly trialed out properly the way we do in healthcare, and yet they still market it as a solution that's able to do what it says it's going to do, but it really can't, because they're thinking marketing when really they should be thinking patients.
Yes.
So, yeah. And on that note, do you think that kind of challenge, or at least that kind of issue, would be dealt with per se if we had doctors becoming engineers or vice versa?
So there's a long history in medicine of the physician scientist. So we definitely know that model, the MD, PhD, the physician scientist, and that's a whole lot more common, I think, than the physician engineer. Though the physician engineer also exists, but I happen to believe more strongly in the physician engineer partnership because we each bring something special to the table, and it's hard to excel at both. And I've spent my whole career working with passionate physicians and healthcare workers. As an engineer, they have shown me something about what we do in healthcare. They talk about patients all the time. They talk about the trust their patients put in them. They talk about the reasons they're doing what they do. And that reminds me that all of us in healthcare play some part, large or small, in taking care of those patients. So when physicians talk about innovation, they're not excited about technology, at least not in the way that engineers are. This physician-engineer partnership, I think, is what makes the Mayo Clinic engineering team so successful. And I'll give you an example. Earlier this year, I worked with one of our physician innovators here at Mayo, and he just finished a semester working with a team at Georgia Tech University to address a problem he'd been working on for years. And he said to me, "I'm not an engineer. I don't know that stuff. I just want to do surgery. That's all I want to do." He said, "I want to go home. I want to see my kids. I don't have time to learn how to be an engineer." But then he said, "My patients need this, and I got to figure out how to solve this problem." It's like, I don't care who gets the IP and the royalties. I just want this for my patients. And so what he did is he partnered with engineers. He does what he does best. He's a brilliant surgeon and an amazing innovator and problem solver. You partner him with an engineer and you've got an innovation engine, and I promise you this won't be the last innovation he's responsible for. And most of our physician innovators don't want to start companies and do stuff like that. They just want to solve problems for their patients. So that's what I see.
And so what about, let's say, the new generation of physicians? So right now you have a lot of physicians, for instance, doing, they either go ahead and do like a PhD in machine learning, some of them move on to XR, some of them go ahead for a higher degree in relation to tech or engineering, and then do proper medicine. What do you think working with these, or how do you think they fit in teams? So if you had one of these trying to approach you and sort of fit in the teamwork, how do you think, or where do you think you'll be able to see them?
Yeah, well, we do see some of that, and I'm seeing a little bit more of that than I saw in the past. You know, people who get MD degrees but really want to solve problems as opposed to treat patients. And you know, historically, that's not unusual. We have physicians that really like patient care, and we have physicians that really like the science and get into things like pathology and things like that. Well, I think we're starting to see the same thing in the technology space now, particularly around AI, because I think AI just complements the knowledge set of a physician so well. It's a little bit harder to get into, you know, designing wearable devices and things like that because it's really a different skill set. But I see a huge opportunity for physicians just moving into this engineering space around, you know, various types of apps, leveraging AI-based algorithms to really come up with some pretty incredible insights, I think, on how to better treat patients.
That's great. Yeah. So I think we probably have less than 1 minute until the Zoom recording just stops. So I'm sorry, I'm going to have to stop you there, even though I really wanted to hear more about this. So thank you very much, Mark, for being with us here today. And thank you to the clinician engineers for organizing the whole thing. I learned so much, and I'm sure our audience will too.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you. Great meeting you.